Hey guys, if you saw the video recently where we had a graph going over tower usage, there's another one on the blog recently. This time it's about hero usage, so let's go over that as well. This one is less interesting because there's less information, but it's about heroes, so you know it's potentially more interesting for some people. Anyway, there's nothing really here that wasn't already too obvious, but having the actual numbers to look over is interesting. And although it's worth mentioning, these are very skewed by a number of factors, so I will just mention that quickly. And main factor there is collection event. There's been a lot of collection events recently, more than before the heroes were looked at last for usage. And collection events do encourage specific heroes because a lot of people just do the same thing, I guess, and they build up a lot of games in a short pace of time using that same strategy. And this kind of, for a lot of people, does skew numbers for heroes that are just cheaper to start with, which is Obyn and Quincy, of course. And as we can see, Obyn and Quincy are at the top. And yeah, so I got here Obyn at the top, this blue line. Obyn's been quite popular for a long time, since he buffs magic towers. Quincy coming in second. Quincy is also kind of skewed in that he's the hero you start with. So people, you'd think this. You'd think that people just use Quincy at the start and that skews numbers a bit, but actually people who are just starting and haven't really picked a hero they like yet take up a very, very small number of the total games happening. So the only real skewing happening there is people that haven't gone out and tried other heroes yet, but are getting into playing the game, and they're heading towards being a really active player. But that's still not a very high percentage of the overall numbers, so a lot of people just like Quincy. And he also probably gets a lot of popularity in harder Chimps matches because a lot of those more difficult maps need a hero that is cheap to start. They don't work if you don't have one, which is generally speaking Quincy or Obyn still. But those numbers also get skewed because a lot of people lose a lot in the earlier rounds, so they go through and play a bunch of games, placing down Obyn or Quincy, skewing those numbers up, and that inflates the numbers of usage of these heroes. So anyway, that is part of a reason why those two are so much higher than the others. Even though Obyn is probably the best hero in the game right now, which is debatable because Pat is clearly the most powerful, but Obyn is just the easiest to use with a nice average level of power at all levels of gameplay, and that makes him essentially the best. Even though he's the best, and you would expect to see him on top, Quincy's right there just below him, even though Quincy is arguably the worst to a lot of people, so those two factors. Anyway, I've rambled on way too long about that. That is why those two are so far ahead of the others. Let's look at the actual rest of the numbers. So Benjamin coming in third, which we can see is quite close to Quincy. This is a big change from the last graph, which probably no one really saw. But last time Obyn and Benjamin were basically tied. They had been tied for a while. And the reason that was the case, also skewed by collection events. For collection events are a more recent thing, and time from the beginning of Bloons' time, even though Benjamin wasn't there at the start, popularity of the game has increased a lot over time since Ben was added. So like the time before Ben was added didn't really contribute much to the numbers anyway. But Benjamin has been incredibly popular in co-op. He is probably the number one pick in co-op. And with collection events, there's a lot more people spamming non-co-op games. The co-op game numbers themselves don't really drop, but in collection events, there's a lot more people coming on to just play a lot and unlock those chests, so they throw up the single player plays a lot. And since Ben is mainly used in co-op, his numbers drop there. So that's why Ben, Quincy, and Obyn are kind of where they are. The rest of them, I don't think are influenced by those numbers quite as much. So let's look at those. Now, Adora, most recently added hero. A lot of people just have fun with her. A lot of people try to bring them down and say that she's bad, and sorry, so let's point this here. So we're looking at the green line Adora. So she is not a buffing hero, and automatically that drops her down. And when you compare her to the other non-buffing heroes, which are like Quincy, Striker Jones, Striker has buffs, sorry. Quincy, Captain Churchill, and to a lesser extent Ezili. Ezili has buffs, but not in Chimps. Adora takes a lot of farming to get her up, and that's the part that holds her back there. And she also gets a huge buff from Monkey Knowledge, same as Quincy does actually, but comparable to other heroes, a lot of her power comes from Monkey Knowledge. And all this leads to her being kind of just not good in Chimps. She is not a Chimps hero. And that's why she's high, because most people don't really spam playing Chimps. It's a more expert level thing, and a lot of people just have fun messing around in lower game modes where they don't have to worry about losing. So Adora, very popular tower still. Gwendolyn recently got a large buff, and her popularity is going up. She's arguably one of the strongest late game heroes now. Her early game potential is not as high due to difficulty of maintaining her buff when it's needed, and her just starting price being high, comparable to like Obyn, Quincy. Ezili is a cheaper one, but you know, Ezili. So yeah, Gwen going up, definitely quite a good hero now, in a decent spot. Too expensive to place early, so doesn't get the boost from people playing collection events and stuff. Next one, Striker Jones. These ones are quite close now. Which one are we looking at? The one that's currently lower, but it is overall on average higher. Striker Jones. Striker Jones is actually kind of really, really broken at what he's good at now. His stuns are on point. I've had a lot of fun recently using him with the new mortar change in the middle path, because he has permastuns now, so that stun damage bonus on the mortars is always up, and if you can maintain that, they're actually a really strong tower. Only problem is mortar micro. Yeah, having a lot of mortars, it's not that good to. It's not that good unless you're really good at kind of micromanaging your mortars. And that's probably why Striker's low. He is very limited in only buffing 2 towers, but he does a fairly good job at it. Unfortunately, those 2 towers are not super popular. The mortar itself, very good, but as I mentioned in the last graph we looked at, mortar's not a spammable tower, so you're probably not going to use Striker Jones just to buff 1 or 2 mortars for the most part. Captain Churchill. Captain Churchill skewed down the lowest because of those other factors, like collection event things, actually. He's so expensive to place. The interesting thing about Captain Churchill is that, since he's so expensive to place, probably, he actually has probably the highest win rate of any hero. Because, I mean, if you can afford to place him down, you're probably having a good game. But he himself is not considered too high tier. He's very strong at what he does, just too expensive to get down slow XP curve. That's why he's a bit lower. Pat Fusty, second last. Poor Pat. Pat's the strongest hero in the game. Absolutely, there's no question about that. Anyone who denies that is just wrong. his rallying roar is just so strong. It's insanely strong. Outside of Chimps, he's definitely like kind of unparalleled at buffing the right towers. Inside of Chimps, Gwen might catch up a little bit just because her uptime is now stronger, and Obyn, same, has full uptime, so he is good in Chimps, but his buff just isn't as good. His buff is so much weaker than Pat's that Pat is incredible. And Pat's stun potential as well is huge. The reason that even... so, Pat... I've made him sound amazing, right? He's really good. The reason he's so low is he's terrible at dealing with balloons himself. He can't do that. He only buffs, really. He only buffs and supports. His slap, even though it does high damage, his radius is too low. He's too kind of slow until he levels up a lot. He just can't deal with balloons. He just can't deal with things. He needs support to carry him. And that's why, and also, he is terrible in co-op, because you need the correct place on the map to put him, and you don't guarantee you're going to get that in co-op unless you're, like, organizing it with friends. But, yeah, he does not get much use in co-op because of that, opposite of Ben. And he's purely inflated by being used in mainly high-tier, like, really difficult challenge strats because he does the most damage and best support in slowing. Oh, to be honest, Striker Jones is probably the best stun, but he offers weaker buffs. So yeah, but Pat offers the next best stunning with incredible offense. So it's interesting to see him so low, but it's kind of cool in a way as well that the one which is almost certainly the strongest is one of the least used. Very interesting to see that, just because usability. Ezili, very last. Poor Ezili. Heartstopper's not great. She has difficulty starting early game. She can start early game now because of her recent change, which... Oh, not recent, actually, it was quite a while ago, but she had a change which allowed her base attack to actually hit multiple targets, because it used to be single target until level 4. That helped her a bit, but she's just... Her buff can't be used in Chimps because it has to sacrifice lives. Her buff itself, since it uses lives, you have to farm lives to actually use it much, even when you're not in Chimps. And the towers that farm lives are not generally used. Main one being the heli, like Chinook. That gives so many lives. But aside from that, stuff like Marketplace, it's not really used. Spirit of the Forest, not really used. You can't use Benjamin at the same time as Ezili unless you're in co-op. So, but you know, Ezili isn't really used in co-op. The thing that Ezili excels at is destroying the bads. She can do that with her Hex when she's level 20. She's considered the best free play hero, but free play itself, the free play games take hours compared to the small games you win really quickly, which take like 5 to 20 minutes depending on if you're doing easy or impoppable. So even if there's a lot of people playing free play, the stats are not going to go up high there because these people are spending days like in one game compared to people doing maybe 10 or more games a day with a different hero, and that really makes sense. There was for a while a bit of debate over the best free play hero, but I'm fairly sure that it is Ezili now at this point. Pat's buff doesn't really work on the Temple that well, since Temple already does huge damage, so he is just not a great free play hero. His stun is no longer required in free play because you're already perma-stunning everything that isn't a bad, so useless. The only other heroes you'd really consider... Nope. Ezili's pretty much it, isn't she? If there was a hero that buffed attack speed, then that would be decent on a Temple, but no, they're only... It's Ezili that does the best. Yeah. So, what do I think of this graph in general? It's too skewed to really call, but I do think that most heroes do have a place that they excel at, and they are balanced at that. And this use doesn't really tell that. Like Pat and Ezili at the very bottom, it makes sense that they're at the bottom. And Ezili herself, I do think she's probably a bit weaker for regular play. She could be better in regular play compared to other heroes. But she's very good at free play. So she does excel at her one thing. She maybe, yeah. Pat doesn't need a buff for sure. If anything, he's still too good, but probably won't see anything there. But next ones, yeah, Striker, Churchill. These ones are probably the actual. Yeah, these ones at the moment would probably be the actual bottom if you kind of like extrapolated where Pat and Ezili would be by taking out other factors. But then, yeah, nah, I would say so. Because Striker, he excels at his old bomb artillery strategy thing, but that's not a strategy that excels. It's just a strategy. That's why he's low. Captain Churchill, he excels at just doing being a big tanky tank himself, tanking tank shots, doing high damage. But that's not good for free play because Ezili serves that purpose, and he's too expensive to place most of the time. So the only real place he excels at is just being a strong tower on his own. If you don't have anything you want to support, which is more of a challenge sort of thing, but challenges get so specific. There's a lot of stuff you can do in challenges, so he doesn't really excel in challenges exactly enough because nothing can. The only things that excel in challenges are the things that are allowed in a challenge. That's why I would consider those two the bottom. So yeah, we go up to Gwendolyn and Adora. A lot of people would put Adora lower as well, but she is just popular. She excels in the same way that Churchill does. But at the same time, she really, she just has that sacrifice thing, which is so cool, and a lot of people enjoy that. She has Easter eggs related to her, which people enjoy. And, you know, Temple is probably, Temple is the amazing sort of thing in this universe of balloons, so, yeah. Gwendolyn herself, yeah, Gwendolyn's one of the ones near the top, but data skewed because of the collection event stuff I mentioned, the general stuff. Obyn, easily number one. This makes sense here. Probably not much more worth saying about this, really. But yeah, interesting data. There is a big gap in the middle here. Ignore that. That's clearly a point where data was not collected for some reason. But here we are. Top used heroes. Even though, like, take that with a grain of salt, does not necessarily reflect best. And I would absolutely say this doesn't represent the best at all. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble on and probably repeat myself a bunch, but yeah. Maybe we'll get more graphs. That'd be cool. I like talking about graphs, even if it's a bit weird. See you around.